Somewhere between waking up and falling asleep, most people no longer realize how often they reach for their phone. Not because they planned to, not because they needed to, but because something inside them told them to check. One swipe, one refresh, one more scroll. And suddenly, 10 minutes are gone. Sometimes 30. Sometimes an hour disappears without any clear memory of what was actually seen. Now multiply that by dozens of times per day. What you get is not just a habit, it is a loop. And that loop has been engineered to be nearly impossible to escape. The first time you notice it, it feels harmless. A quick look at notifications, a short break during work, a few minutes of entertainment before bed. But over time, something subtle begins to shift. Silence starts to feel uncomfortable. Stillness feels empty. Moments without stimulation begin to feel like something is missing. And without realizing it, your attention starts to belong somewhere else. Not to you, but to the feed. The problem is not simply that people use social media too much. The problem is that most people no longer choose when they use it. They react to it. A vibration, a sound, a visual cue, a moment of boredom, a slight discomfort in silence, and each trigger pulls them back in. What looks like a free decision is often just a conditioned response. The phone is no longer a tool that you pick up. It is a system that picks you up. And the most disturbing part is that it doesn't feel like control. It feels like preference, like curiosity, like just checking. But underneath that feeling is something much more powerful. A psychological mechanism that was designed to be sticky, not useful. Sticky. To understand how this happens, you have to understand what your brain is actually reacting to. The human brain was never designed for infinite novelty. For most of human history, new information was rare. Attention was focused on survival, social belonging, and immediate environment. When something new appeared, it mattered. A sound in the bushes, a change in someone's facial expression, a shift in social status. Novelty meant survival relevance. So the brain developed a powerful reward system around new information. Dopamine is often misunderstood as a pleasure chemical, but it is more accurate to think of it as a prediction chemical. It spikes when your brain expects something important might happen, not when you get the reward, but when you might get it. And this is where everything changes. Because social media does not give consistent rewards. It gives unpredictable ones. Sometimes you open the app and nothing interesting happens. Sometimes you open it and something slightly interesting appears. And sometimes, unexpectedly, something emotionally charged appears. A message, a like, a video that triggers laughter or anger or shock. This unpredictability is not a flaw. It is the core mechanism, because unpredictable rewards are the most addictive pattern the human brain can experience. At first, the platforms were not explicitly designed to exploit psychology at this level, but over time, they evolved. Every interaction was measured. Every second of attention was tracked. Every moment of hesitation was analyzed. What makes people stop scrolling? What makes them continue? What makes them come back? The answers to those questions were not left to chance. They became the blueprint. And slowly, the feed stopped being a place you visit. It became a system that studies you while you are inside it. It learns what you pause on, what you rewatch, what you ignore but return to later. It learns your emotional triggers better than you consciously understand them yourself. And then it adjusts. Not to inform you, not to educate you, but to keep you there. The hidden truth is not that social media is bad. The hidden truth is that it is indifferent. It does not care whether your time is well spent or wasted. It only responds to one metric: engagement. And engagement does not distinguish between curiosity and compulsion, between learning and escaping, between connection and avoidance. Your attention is treated as raw material, and like any resource, it is refined, optimized, and extracted. The result is a system that becomes more compelling over time, even if your experience inside it becomes less satisfying. This is the paradox most people miss. The more time you spend on it, the less fulfilled you feel, but the more it adapts to keep you there. There is a moment many people experience, but rarely talk about. You open an app without intention. You scroll for a while. You close it. And immediately you feel a kind of emptiness. Not dramatic, just a slight sense that time passed without meaning. So you open it again. Not because you want to, but because you want to undo that feeling. And this is where the loop completes itself. The app creates the discomfort that only the app can temporarily relieve. It becomes both the source of restlessness and the temporary escape from it. This is not accidental behavior. It is a closed psychological circuit. But the most powerful aspect of social media addiction is not the content itself. It is the identity shift that happens gradually. Over time, your attention is trained to fragment. Long focus becomes harder. Boredom becomes intolerable. Waiting becomes something to eliminate instead of experience. And slowly, your internal world starts to feel quieter than the external feed. Not because your mind is empty, but because it is constantly interrupted. Thoughts begin but do not finish. Ideas appear but are replaced before they develop. Emotions rise but are quickly overwritten by new stimuli. And in that fragmented state, something important is lost. The ability to sit with yourself long enough to hear what you actually think. At the deepest level, the issue is not distraction, it is displacement. Your attention is no longer anchored in your own life. It is continuously pulled into curated realities, lives that look more interesting, achievements that feel more urgent, conflicts that feel more immediate. Even relaxation becomes something you consume rather than something you experience. And the brain, constantly adjusting to this environment, begins to treat real life as understimulating. Not because real life changed, but because your baseline perception did. The hidden truth is that this system does not need to trap you forcefully. It only needs to outcompete silence. And silence is where most people eventually lose, because silence forces reflection, and reflection forces awareness, and awareness makes the loop visible, which is exactly why the system is designed to minimize silence at all costs. Autoplay, infinite scroll, notifications, recommendations, short-form content. There is no natural stopping point, because stopping points create decisions, and decisions create exits. So what actually breaks the cycle? Not willpower. Willpower is unstable against systems that operate continuously. Not complete disconnection either. For most people, that is unrealistic and temporary. The solution is something more subtle and more structural. It begins with interrupting predictability. The brain is not only addicted to rewards, it is addicted to cues. So when cues are removed or weakened, the loop loses strength. This means changing the environment, not just the behavior. If the phone is the first thing you see in the morning, the loop begins before awareness. If it is always within reach, the cue is constant. If notifications are always active, the brain never fully disengages from expectation. Breaking the loop requires creating friction between impulse and action. Even a small delay is powerful, because in that delay, awareness returns. And when awareness returns, choice becomes possible again. Another critical shift happens when you stop treating boredom as a problem to solve. Boredom is not empty. It is transitional. It is the mind recalibrating away from external input. But in a hyper-stimulated environment, boredom feels like discomfort instead of recovery. So it gets avoided at all costs. Yet boredom is exactly where deeper focus begins to rebuild. It is the threshold that modern attention almost never crosses anymore. When you stay in it long enough, something changes. Thoughts reconnect. Ideas deepen. Mental noise reduces. not immediately, but gradually. And in that gradual return, attention becomes yours again. There is also a deeper layer that is often overlooked. Social media does not only compete for attention, it competes for meaning. It tells you what is important right now, what people are reacting to, what deserves emotional energy. And because it updates constantly, it creates the illusion that urgency is everywhere. But urgency is not the same as importance. And when everything feels urgent, nothing actually is. Rebuilding control means reintroducing hierarchy into your attention. Some things matter more than others. Some inputs deserve long focus. Others deserve none. Without that structure, attention becomes reactive instead of intentional. In the end, social media addiction is not a failure of discipline. It is the predictable result of a system designed around human psychology at scale. A system that understands unpredictability better than most users understand themselves. A system that turns curiosity into habit, habit into dependency, and dependency into default behavior. But understanding this does something important. It breaks the illusion that the behavior is random or personal failure. It reveals the architecture behind it. And once you see the architecture, you can begin to navigate it differently. Not by rejecting technology, but by reclaiming attention as something finite and valuable. Something that does not need to be constantly spent. Something that can be directed again. The final shift is not about removing the phone from your life. It is about removing the automatic nature of your relationship with it. Because the moment there is a pause between impulse and action, the loop weakens. And in that weakness, something returns. Choice. Not dramatic, not immediate, but real. And in a world designed to eliminate that moment, even a small return of choice is the beginning of freedom.